Kingston upon Thames, England, March 1923. The morning air was sharp, the sky low and grey, and the factory floor smelled of oil, wood dust, and ambition. Dozens of hands-shaped wings from spruce and linen, hammering ribs into place, testing tension across cables. In one corner of the workshop stood a quiet man in a simple suit. No medals, no academic cap, no rank pinned to his jacket. He wasn't a university graduate, he wasn't an officer, and he wasn't yet a name anyone outside this building would recognise. His name was Sidney Camm, and he was about to change the shape of war. Not by standing on a battlefield, but by building the machines that would dominate it. Camm came from modest beginnings. Born in 1893, he grew up in Windsor, not far from the roar of early aircraft flying from open fields. While other boys admired cavalry parades, Camm stared at the sky. He did not come from wealth. He did not have access to elite schooling. He did not pursue university. When many future engineers studied mathematics in lecture halls, Camm sat at a wooden bench, carving model aircraft by hand, learning flight with wood, glue, and intuition. The school system did not shape him. Failure was not an option for someone who refused to stop learning. He saw flight not as a theory, but as a craft. And when aviation was still a fragile experiment, he built precise working models, each one a small step toward understanding aerodynamic truth, the way a sculptor understands stone. By 1923, he joined Hawker Aircraft, a small British aviation firm not yet destined for glory. Britain did not appear ready for another war. The Great War's scars were fresh, and the RAF was still young. Yet, in Camm's mind, peace was fragile, and technology was the only shield civilization could depend on. He wasn't designing toys anymore, he was designing survival. He had a simple philosophy. A combat aircraft must be fast, reliable, repairable, and deadly, in that order. Beauty was irrelevant. Hype was irrelevant. Functional excellence was everything. In the 1930s, while Europe drifted toward instability again, Camm developed the Hawker Fury, a sleek biplane that pushed the limits of speed at the time. But even as it entered service, he knew the era of biplanes was ending. The world was moving toward metal, monoplane fighters, and higher speeds. Where others hesitated, wanting to squeeze one more generation of life from canvas and wood, Camm moved forward. He designed an aircraft that looked too radical for traditionalists and too conservative for innovators. A hybrid of old and new. A machine that on paper didn't fit a perfect category. It would soon become the Hawker Hurricane. Camm's colleagues described his technical mind as relentless. He didn't believe in miracles, meant only precision. Every rivet mattered, every bracket mattered. He told young designers, if you design something that cannot be built, you have failed before the first bolt is turned. The Hurricane would be built to fight, to repair, to survive. Unlike competitors, its structure allowed damaged sections to be replaced fast, in simple airfields by men under pressure, with limited tools. It wasn't the sleekest design in the world. It wasn't the showpiece. It wasn't the future, yet. But it was strong, and strong would soon matter more than elegant. As Europe darkened, with Germany rearming, treaties collapsing, and dictators rising, Camm's aircraft program accelerated. His team worked long hours on drawing boards, calculating lift, stress, and airflow, without digital computers, without simulation software, without shortcuts. Everything was manual, everything was earned. Camm rarely raised his voice. He did not waste time with praise or flattery. He demanded excellence, and he delivered it himself. In meetings, his sentences were short. Decisions were decisive. He believed in results, not reputation. When someone asked him once what genius meant, he answered, hard work, properly applied. By 1937, the Hurricane entered service with the Royal Air Force. At first, it received polite recognition, not celebration. The sleek Supermarine Spitfire stole attention. Photographs loved the Spitfire. Newspapers praised it. The public adored its curves and drama. The Hurricane looked quiet in comparison. Thicker wings, fabric-covered rear fuselage, less glamorous lines. It was not built to impress photographers. It was built to kill enemy aircraft and return home. Most of Britain did not yet understand what was coming. Camm did. The RAF prepared quietly. Pilots trained. Airfields strengthened. The Hurricane squadrons expanded. Europe drifted toward the inevitable. And in 1939, when the war began, Camm's machine lifted into the sky for combat, not to win glory, but to prevent national collapse. Training ended. Theory ended. Now came reality in the form of black crossed wings crossing the Channel. The Hurricane was ready. Britain didn't know it yet, but the fate of a nation would soon depend on a self-taught engineer who refused to accept limits, ignored academic prestige, and believed that skill is earned in silence, not awarded on paper. The storm of aerial war was coming, and in the chaos, when the numbers were against Britain, when survival seemed unlikely, when the sky filled with enemies, one machine would carry the fight. Steady, brutal, indispensable. The Hawker Hurricane would become the first shield over Britain. And Sidney Camm, the man who learned engineering with his hands instead of degrees, would become the architect of resistance in the air. If knowledge can be earned outside classrooms and genius can emerge from discipline rather than diplomas, how many heroes have been overlooked simply because they came from ordinary beginnings? By 1935, Europe was accelerating toward conflict. Hitler had reintroduced conscription, rebuilt the Luftwaffe, and violated treaty after treaty. The world hesitated. Britain debated budgets and diplomacy. But inside the Hawker factory, Sidney Camm did not debate. He designed. Air combat was evolving. Speeds were rising. Weapons were deadlier. And biplanes, the pride of the First World War, were becoming obsolete. Many traditional British engineers still clung to the safety and predictability of old designs. Camm did not. The world was changing. An aircraft had to change with it. He began shaping the airplane that would become the Hawker Hurricane. A fighter that could climb fast, turn tight, absorb punishment, and be repaired anywhere by anyone under pressure. Its structure blended new metal construction with proven fabric-covered techniques. Critics called it old-fashioned. Camm called it practical. He understood something others ignored. War is not won by perfection. It is won by reliability. A fighter could be elegant, aerodynamic, cutting edge. But if a mechanic in a muddy field couldn't fix it at midnight under fire, it was useless. Camm built the Hurricane to be the opposite of fragile. It was the fighter a pilot trusted, and a ground crew could bring back to life with basic tools. In meetings, his thinking was sharp, his standards severe. When a young draftsman once defended a flawed drawing with, "I thought," Camm cut him short. Don't think, no. Not arrogance, necessity. Aviation was unforgiving. A misplaced bolt or miscalculated tolerance could mean death. Camm demanded clarity, precision, and proof. He didn't gamble. He engineered certainty. The Hurricane first flew in November 1935. It looked heavier, less graceful than sleek competitors, but its performance shocked skeptics. It hit speeds over 380 mph, a threshold that marked the arrival of truly modern fighters. When the Air Ministry saw the prototype run, there was no hesitation. They placed a large order immediately. Britain needed fighters fast, and Camm delivered one that could be produced efficiently and deployed quickly, but even then the Hurricane arrived in silence. No newspapers celebrated it, no film reels glamorized it. The elegant Spitfire captured imagination and headlines. The Hurricane earned something more important, the trust of pilots and engineers. In RAF hangars across the country, ground crews discovered how fast they could swap wings, repair bullet holes, replace engines, and send the aircraft back into the sky. Pilots valued its stability during combat. Its wide landing gear prevented crashes during hard landings on improvised fields. It was a workhorse, not a showpiece. As Hitler's forces marched into Poland in 1939, Britain entered the war. Hurricanes deployed quickly. They fought in France and over Dunkirk, often facing the feared Messerschmitt Bf 109, a faster, more refined German fighter. On paper, the 109 was superior. In the real world, war was not fought on paper. The Hurricane turned tightly, hit hard, and, crucially, came home damaged but alive. And unlike many German aircraft that required specialised factories, Hurricanes could be patched in barns, tents, and airfields blasted by enemy fire. Camm's philosophy held true. Durability wins battles. By mid-1940, Britain stood alone. France had fallen. Europe was under Nazi control. Across the Channel, the Luftwaffe prepared to crush Britain through air superiority. If the RAF failed, invasion would follow. The stakes could not have been higher. And as the Battle of Britain approached, the RAF had 32 Hurricane squadrons and just 19 Spitfire squadrons. History remembered the Spitfire. Strategy depended on the Hurricane. Pilots called it a gun platform. Steady, predictable, lethal at medium range. It didn't need flair. It needed results. And it delivered. It caught bombers, tore through formations, and punched holes in the Luftwaffe's belief in inevitable victory. Camm did not seek recognition. While others spoke to the press or appeared in photographs, he returned to his drawing board. War was not a moment for celebration. It was a test of preparation. And he wasn't finished. As the Hurricane entered combat, he was already designing its successors, anticipating future threats, future speeds, future forms of attack. Improvement was not optional. Progress was not negotiable. The enemy evolved, and so must the engineer. Factories worked day and night. Young men trained feverishly. Radar operators scanned the sky. Somewhere in a quiet office, Sidney Camm studied reports and listened to pilots' feedback, refining designs while knowing that every screw, every joint, every line he drew could determine who lived and who never returned. The world would soon watch the greatest air battle in history unfold above Britain. And when German bombers darkened the sky and the island's future hung by a thread, it would not be speeches or promises that held the line, but machines forged by discipline, logic, and precision. Machines born from one mind. The Hawker Hurricane was ready. Britain was not yet defeated, because one engineer refused to accept complacency. In war, the world often praises the fighter who pulls the trigger. But should we remember more the engineer who built the weapon that made victory possible? July 1940, southern England. Britain stood alone. France had fallen, Europe lay under Nazi control, and Hitler prepared Operation Sea Lion, the planned invasion of the United Kingdom. But before troops could land, the Luftwaffe had one mission: destroy the Royal Air Force. If the RAF fell, Britain would fall. No army, no navy, no coastal defences mattered without control of the sky. This was not simply a military campaign. It was a national last stand. And as radar operators tracked incoming German aircraft and sirens began to echo across towns and countryside, one machine rolled across British airfields again and again. The Hawker Hurricane, born from the mind of a self-taught engineer named Sidney Camm. The Spitfire would chase the fast German fighters. The Hurricane would break the bombers. This division of labour was not glamorous. It was strategic. A bomber left flying could wipe out a factory, a port, a city block, or a squadron on the ground. Hurricanes aimed for the heart of the German assault, punching through Junkers, Heinkels, and Dorniers, with controlled bursts from 8 303 Browning machine guns. The job was dangerous. Bombers flew in tight defensive formation, gun turrets watching every approach. For Hurricane pilots, closing in often meant flying directly into return fire. But they did it anyway. Britain had no choice. When the battle reached its peak in August and September, Hurricanes scored the majority of RAF victories. Some estimates place their share of kills at between 55% and 65%. Pilots trusted the aircraft because they trusted what Camm had designed: stability, predictable flight behaviour, and rugged construction. If a hurricane took hits and limped home, ground crews repaired it quickly, sometimes overnight. Bullet holes were patched, fabric replaced, engines swapped, and the plane flew again at dawn. In war, reliability is not a feature, it's survival. Many German pilots initially underestimated the Hurricane. They had heard stories of the sleek British Spitfire and assumed this boxier aircraft was outdated. But soon they learned a harsh truth. Underestimated tools often win wars. The Hurricane didn't need elegance to kill. It needed only discipline and execution. And Britain had both. The Luftwaffe threw everything it had. Waves of fighters and bombers day after day. Factories, radar stations, ports and cities bombed. Airfields cratered, runways shredded, hangars burning. Yet the Hurricanes kept rising. Young pilots, some barely trained, fought until fuel or ammunition ran dry. Mechanics worked in blackout conditions, sleep-deprived, hands blistered, often hearing the distant thump of bombs landing nearby. The Hurricane was their machine, and they kept it alive. Camm stayed away from headlines. While the world praised pilots, he continued improving designs, preparing for the next threat, even as the current one raged. He reviewed after-action reports, studied bullet damage, evaluated engine failures, and iterated constantly. He didn't seek glory, he pursued performance, and slowly the battle shifted. German losses mounted. The Luftwaffe misjudged British strength, mistakenly believed the RAF was nearly destroyed, and shifted to bombing cities. A desperate strategic error. Britain still suffered, but the RAF remained operational because of one thing: its fighters were still flying. By October 1940, Hitler postponed the invasion. Britain had held, not through speeches or luck, but through the quiet precision of workers, the bravery of pilots, and the engineering discipline of men like Sidney Camm. The world celebrated the Spitfire, and its legend is deserved. But history often forgets the aircraft that carried the heaviest burden, absorbed the hardest blows, and delivered the majority of kills. The Hurricane was the shield that kept Britain standing. After the battle, Camm's vision only grew sharper. He understood something others overlooked. The war was not static. Technology moved fast. To survive, nations needed machines that didn't just match the enemy, they had to evolve faster. He turned immediately to the future. New engines, new structures, new purposes. The war in the air was changing. Bombers were getting faster. The enemy was adapting. And Camm, without hesitation, moved forward with designs that pushed beyond the Hurricane to something stronger, faster, and more lethal. The Hurricane had served its purpose. It had defended a nation when defeat seemed inevitable. It proved that quiet engineering matters as much as heroism in the sky. And it established Camm not simply as a designer, but as a strategic weapon of war. One who fought with pencil, slide rule, and an uncompromising expectation for excellence. Britain survived because its defenders refused to break. So did its engineers. When a nation stands on the edge of collapse, what matters more? The hero who pulls the trigger, or the silent mind that built the tool that makes victory possible? 1941. Britain had survived the Battle of Britain, barely. But the war was far from over. The Luftwaffe was adapting, new German fighters were arriving, and speed was now the deciding factor in aerial combat. The Hurricane, once revolutionary, was aging. Most engineers would have celebrated victory and held on to their success. Sidney Camm did not. Victory was simply proof that evolution must continue. The enemy would return stronger, and Britain needed to be ahead when it happened. He shifted his team immediately to a new fighter, the Hawker Typhoon. It began with a simple idea: power through horsepower. The Typhoon would carry a massive Napier Sabre engine, a technical monster capable of unprecedented performance but notoriously difficult to tame. It promised immense speed, but only if someone could engineer stability around it. Many believed the engine was too complex, too unreliable, too experimental. Camm didn't debate potential, he engineered solutions. The early Typhoon prototypes were fast, but they had flaws: compressive buffeting at high speeds, tail failures, mechanical unreliability. In the field, pilots doubted it. Some commanders questioned whether the aircraft should enter combat at all. Camm took criticism personally, not emotionally, scientifically. He demanded data. He asked the RAF to send detailed combat and mechanical reports. When a pilot complained that visibility was poor during combat dive angles, Camm didn't argue. He redesigned the canopy. A weakness identified was not a defect. It was a blueprint for improvement. As the Typhoon entered service, Germany unleashed new weapons: the deadly Focke-Wulf 190, fast, low-altitude fighters, and armoured ground forces sweeping across Europe. The RAF needed a machine that could dive, strike, and escape with brutal force. The Typhoon grew into that role. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't gain instant admiration. But when low-level interception missions became critical, or stopping German fighter bombers and destroying armoured columns, the Typhoon excelled. Its speed at low altitude and firepower made it feared by German ground forces. Rockets, cannons, bombs, it attacked with force that shook tanks and shattered bridges. And still, Camm was not done. He moved again, refining the Typhoon into something lethal and controlled: the Hawker Tempest. Better wings, improved aerodynamics, greater stability, higher speed. In combat, the Tempest hunted V-1 flying bombs, Germany's terror weapons aimed at British cities. The V-1 screamed through the sky at nearly 400 Mbit/pov. Only the Tempest could consistently intercept them. Some pilots shot them down with gunfire. Others tipped wings to destabilize them, a move demanding precision, nerves, and absolute faith in the machine beneath them. Speed meant survival. Accuracy meant victory. The enemy shifted again. Jets were coming. Germany was experimenting with the Me-262, the first operational jet fighter. The world was leaving propellers behind. Camm saw it earlier than most. The war forced rapid evolution. Nations that failed to innovate died. Camm pushed further, toward the Hawker Fury, then the Hawker Hunter, and eventually the revolutionary Harrier, the first successful vertical takeoff jet fighter. From wooden biplanes to jet-powered aircraft that could hover, all within one lifetime, guided by one mind. Inside Hawker, people said Camm demanded perfection because he offered it himself. His temper was sharp when standards slipped, not because he loved authority, but because mistakes cost lives. Engineers who worked under him later said he didn't motivate through praise. He motivated through expectation. He believed in simplicity. He believed failure was earned through complacency. He refused to be impressed by reputation. And he proved that innovation does not require permission, only discipline. As the war moved to its final stages, the Typhoon and Tempest became essential tools in the Allied push across Europe. Pilots who once doubted the aircraft later swore by them. Soldiers on the ground called Typhoon squadrons flying artillery. German tank crews learned to fear the sound of Typhoon rockets descending. For Camm, each success was already history the moment it happened. His attention shifted instantly to the next design, the next material, the next aerodynamic solution. His career was not one breakthrough, it was a chain of them. Britain entered the jet age with machines shaped by his philosophy. Engineers who studied his methods echoed them across a generation of aviation design. And yet, even at the height of his achievements, Camm never asked for recognition. He didn't write memoirs, he didn't chase glory. He focused on the work. Because work wins wars long before bombs fall. His fighters did not earn victory through beauty. They earned it through engineering discipline, ruthless function, and relentless refinement, silent precision, practical genius, quiet mastery. When the world celebrated pilots, flags, and speeches, Sidney Camm remained in the background, the architect of the machines that made victory possible. If innovation is the true weapon of war, Why does history remember the warrior more than the engineer who armed him? 1945. The guns fell silent. Cities lay in ruins, nations mourned, and soldiers returned home changed forever. But the war in the air did not end with peace, since it transformed. The propeller age was finished. Jets were the future. For many engineers, this shift was overwhelming. They had mastered one world only to face another overnight. Sidney Camm did not hesitate. He understood something fundamental about technology. Victory rewards momentum, not rest. While others celebrated, Camm turned to the next challenge. He had already begun adapting Hawker's designs for the jet engine. A technology that promised speed beyond imagination, but demanded precision far beyond traditional aircraft design. The stakes were just as high as wartime. Whoever mastered jet power first would lead the skies for decades. The result of this mindset was the Hawker Hunter, one of the greatest jet fighters ever built. It combined raw power, elegant lines, and aerodynamic stability. When it entered service in the early 1950s, it immediately set world speed records. It flew faster than sound. It performed so well that dozens of air forces across the world adopted it. Pilots praised its responsiveness, its reliability, and its agility. The Hunter didn't just fly, it ruled. And yet, even this was not enough for Camm. His mind was already moving again. Jets were fast, but they still depended on runways. In a world where nuclear war and rapid deployment scenarios loomed, Camm pursued an idea no one else had made practical: vertical flight. A combat aircraft that could rise straight up from the ground, hover, move in any direction, then fly at jet speed. It sounded impossible. Revolutions always do. But Camm had no interest in impossibility. He worked alongside a new generation of engineers, men inspired by his discipline, to create the Hawker P1127, the prototype for what would become the Hawker Harrier. The first successful, vertical, short takeoff and landing fighter in history. No runway, no dependency on vulnerable airbases. A machine capable of launching from fields, ships, hidden revetments, anywhere. In the Cold War world, where nuclear strikes could destroy airfields in minutes, this concept wasn't just innovation, it was survival philosophy made real. Camm had now shaped 3 eras of flight: fabric-covered biplanes, metal monoplane fighters, jet-age combat aircraft, and finally, vertical lift revolution. Few in history have driven technology across so many transitions. Most engineers master a decade. Camm mastered a century. And yet, throughout his life, he stayed almost invisible to the public. No publicity tours, no dramatic speeches, no self-mythologizing. When awards came, and they did, he accepted them quietly. To him, trophies meant little. The only prize that mattered was a machine that worked, a pilot who lived, a nation defended. In 1965, at a formal dinner, Camm rose to speak. He was a knight of the British Empire, a Morse pioneer whose designs had protected his country and reshaped flight itself. Instead of a triumphant proclamation, he delivered 10 calm words. All aircraft have 4 dimensions: span, length, height, and politics. Engineering remained rational. The world around it was not. As age caught up, he stayed sharp, opinionated, demanding. Young engineers who entered the industry sometimes came trembling into his office. They left sharper, better, and changed. They knew that if Camm corrected your drawing, you didn't argue, you learned. He passed his standard down like a torch. Sidney Camm died in 1966. No crowds flooded the streets. No global headlines thundered his name. He left the world the same way he lived in it, quietly, disciplined, and victorious. But even today, pilots, historians, and engineers speak of him with a respect that borders on reverence. There is no myth to exaggerate, no fiction required. The truth is enough. This was a man who never attended university, yet out-engineered entire institutions. He never flew in combat, yet shaped the outcome of battles. He didn't ask for loyalty. He earned it through competence. He didn't chase fame. He built machines that proved his worth without a single word. When war threatened to consume his country, Sidney Camm designed not symbols, not marvels, not museum pieces, but weapons that worked, and worked when they mattered most. Today, technology evolves faster than ever. New engineers chase headlines, startups chase hype, and many believe ideas matter more than discipline. Camm's life rejects that belief. He showed that work is the foundation of genius, that clarity outperforms noise, and that greatness often comes from places without privilege, without access, without applause. His aircraft saved Britain, his designs shaped nations, his discipline forged generations of engineers, his refusal to settle changed history, and through it all he remained what he always was, a quiet man with a pencil and standards too high to bend. In a world obsessed with visibility, how many extraordinary minds will never be celebrated simply because they chose results over recognition?